What is a near-death experience? Are they real? Research says 5% of the population has experienced one. That's 16 million people in the United States alone. Is this a coincidence? I don't think so. Today, we're going to look into the facts about near-death experience. Anything that occurs over 16 million times cannot be random. But what is it? What is a near-death experience? So where do you go to get accurate information? Well, I'm glad you asked. The International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANDS, focuses most of its resources into providing the highest quality of information available about NDE-related subjects. And they are the only such membership group in the world. Now, today, I'm very excited to have my guest, Roberta Moore, who is the Vice President of IANDS. She has quite a background, which she's going to get into in more depth, but she's a videographer, she's a writer, she's a speaker, she's the owner of Roberta Moore Productions. She has studied near-death experiences since 1970, and she's a longtime professional member and now the Vice President of IANDS. She has produced 2 training videos, which I'm going to have her talk about in more depth here in a minute. She's a former professor of English at Florida Southwest State College, where she taught for 20 years. So Roberta, welcome to Life Altering Events in our NDE version.
Well, Frank, it's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to talk about near-death experiences, especially at this time when we've all been stressed by COVID and so many upsetting events. The near-death experience can offer a lot of comfort and hope to people.
Oh, absolutely. I've never seen the population so open to listen to this. Now, I touched a little bit on your background, Roberta, but I didn't do it justice. Tell us how you got here. How did you get to this point?
Well, that's a long story and starts when I was 12 or 13 years old. So I have had a number of spiritual experiences, 2 major ones that have impacted my life very greatly. And the first one, as I indicated, was when I was 12 or 13 years old. I was a very religious little Methodist girl in the Dallas, Texas area. And one night I was in my twin bed next to my sister, who had already dropped off to sleep. And I was praying, Lord, lift me up. Lord, lift me up. And I think I got that idea to pray for that from an old hymn called Love Lifted Me, Love Lifted Me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. So here I am, like probably 12 years old. And I'm, Lord, lift me up, Lord, lift me up. And quite unexpectedly, I find myself with my nose, I felt like, what felt like my nose, right against the popcorn ceiling above my bed. My consciousness was lifted up in answer to my prayer. Only I didn't expect a literal answer. I expected, more of a metaphysical answer, higher consciousness, something. But the last thing I ever anticipated in answer to that prayer was to find myself out of my body, up against the ceiling. And I think really the perspective of right against the popcorn ceiling, against all that texture, was what convinced me that I was really there. I mean, it was right in front of my face, or what I perceived as my face. So when I realized that that's where my consciousness was located, I'm going, that's not right. That's not what I meant. No. And I turned and I dove back into my body and back into my twin bed. And I'm lying there, kind of shaking. but I knew not to tell anybody. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't wake my sister. I didn't wake my parents. I said not a word the next day. All I did was turn this over and over in my mind. How could this happen? This was not at all what I had been taught was possible.
Mm-hmm.
The consciousness was supposed to stay securely lodged somewhere around this area. It wasn't supposed to go floating off into, well, it didn't get beyond my room. I was quite terrified of the experience. So that was the first experience that really made me question what I had understood about how the universe works.
Mm-hmm.
I had been raised just, in a typical American kid's education and everything. The material world was solid. You could expect that the sun would come up in the morning and your consciousness would stay in your body.
Right.
So suddenly things were just not what I expected. And I thought about this for a long time, but I didn't tell my parents because I was quite sure they would tell me I was dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this was a very important experience. It was an answer to prayer. And I didn't want anyone to undermine because it was so real. And it was my own truth now. Whatever anybody else had to say, this was my experience and my truth. So I took a couple of, in thinking about that, the first thing I thought was, wow, prayer is powerful.
It
Uh,
is.
it is powerful. This is an interactive universe. Not at all. I was a religious little girl. I believed my Sunday school teachers. I was taught about Jesus and learned hymns and everything. But it never occurred to me that my prayer was going to be so dramatically and so quickly answered. And so this made me, really, really think. So that was the first one. But then there was a second one when I was in my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long story, my spiritual evolution, and I've started taking notes about writing a book about my spiritual life, just a memoir of my spiritual life. But I'm hitting the highlights today.
Good.
Yeah, the second experience was again quite unexpected and was again answered prayer. I had been in the Peace Corps in Thailand, and I was in my early 30s, and I was back in the States in Denver, Colorado, and had really just arrived there. And I don't think my husband and I even had a TV yet. We had a little apartment, and I was sitting quietly one evening in my apartment, and I wasn't, it was after dinner. I wasn't really thinking about anything in particular. And I think my husband was reading a book. And I started to notice something in the corner of the room. And it was like a little sparkle. And if anybody who's listening to this has ever had a migraine, a visual migraine, you get these sparkly things in front of your face. And that's kind of the way it started, but the sparkles were located in the upper corner of the room. So I'm going, well, that's kind of odd. So I'm looking up there, and it starts to get brighter, and it grows in size. And suddenly, it was as if a frame shifted and I went into an altered state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to many people about mystical experiences and near-death experiences, but I've only talked to one other person who has had that shift of a frame, and she had drawn a picture. She showed me on her phone a painting she had done of how this frame shifted, but that was my experience. So now this frame of reference has shifted, and I am completely engaged with what has grown into a very bright light in my room.
Mhm.
But many people talk about seeing the light. I really think that that's not a very accurate description, because it's not only a light, it is a being of light.
Mhm.
The beingness is what's important. I mean, I can turn on bright lights in my house everywhere. Seeing a bright light, I can look at the sun, you know, there are bright lights everywhere. But this bright light of energy that has a beingness to it.
Mhm.
And I started to feel incredible waves of bliss and unconditional love. And a beam of light came from the main light, just like a beam shooting out, and came into the top of my head and totally infused me with light. And I was quite overwhelmed. It's such an understatement.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it was as if I was hit by a bolt of lightning that stayed within my body. And I was vibrating at a very high rate, I felt. And when I looked at my arms, I didn't see solid flesh. I saw myself as energy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like really wow. So I'm seeing myself. If you've seen like the old Star Trek's "Beam Me Up, Scotty," or if you've
Yes.
seen any depictions of string theory, where everything is vibrating and you're
Yeah.
semi-transparent, that's the way I looked when I looked at myself.
Mhm.
And so I was in this energy situation. But it didn't last very long, because I felt, although it was the most blissful, the most loving experience I could have ever had, and I would have wanted to stay forever, I felt that my body would shatter at the sheer power of what had engulfed me. Now, my husband was reading a book in the other corner of the room, and he started to notice that something was happening. And he started to get worried. Are you okay? What's going on? I said, I don't know. And so, not knowing what else to do, he got me a glass of water and a damp cloth to put on my forehead. And actually, yeah, I felt I was in a fever, I suppose, or he didn't know what to do. But it actually started to bring me out. It started to bring me back into material consciousness, which I think was a good thing, because I really don't know what would have happened had I tried to physically maintain that state. What I've read since then was that yogis practice certain exercises to be able to have to hold that energy state.
Mhm.
I was totally unprepared. So, okay, I can't really explain what's happened. I finally just go to bed. There were other things that happened too, but this is the main part of it.
Mhm.
Went to bed, woke up in the morning, and you looking around, and it's like, okay, the walls are still okay in my bedroom. My husband's still asleep next to me. I look like my flesh again. I think I'm okay. But this is an answer to your question. Now my spiritual journey really began. It had begun when I was 12. I had been introduced, I'd met a few people and introduced to a few books, a little bit of Buddhism when I was in my 20s. And I have to say, before this event happened, I was meditating quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that the meditation paved the way for this experience. But again, I was earnestly praying. And I'll back up and say that not only was let me back up a little bit, because I was praying for two things. I was praying to feel the love of God, having no idea what I was praying for. I had no idea. Just like I was praying, Lord, lift me up, and didn't expect
Right.
to find myself on the ceiling.
Right.
I think when I was praying to feel the love of God, I thought a little warm tingle might do it instead of a full-blown mystical experience. But there was a second prayer, much more, material, had to do with just getting back to the States from living in Thailand. And I was looking for a job, and I needed a job.
Mm-hmm.
I knew almost nobody in Denver. I had one set of friends and a few relatives I hadn't even contacted yet. But I was praying for a teaching job. My back against the wall job was to work as a clerical worker somewhere. The problem with that was I couldn't keep my mind on clerical work.
I'll bet.
I have a very active imagination, a very active brain, and my mind would drift off and my hands would make mistakes. And, I was an A student, but probably a D clerical worker. So I was praying, oh Lord, please, I actually praying to the feminine aspect of God specifically, to get a teaching job. So to back up, this happened, I think this happened before the mystical experience. Again, we had a telephone. We'd just gotten a telephone in our little apartment, and one day it rang. And I picked the phone up, and the voice on the end of the line, a woman, said, "Is this Roberta Moore?" Actually, Hayden at the time. This is Roberta Hayden. I said yes, and she said, "I understand that you were in the Peace Corps teaching English in Thailand. Is that right?" I said yes, that's correct. And she said, "Well, I'm looking for teachers for Southeast Asian refugees, where we need to hire somebody right away." And I said, "That sounds wonderful. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Where do you want me to come for an interview?" She said, "Oh, an interview won't be necessary. I think you'll do just fine. You can show up on Monday morning at this church, and we're going to hold classes at this church." So, okay, I hang up the phone, and I'm sitting there going, how did this just happen? I don't know anybody here. I haven't applied for anything. How did this happen? And it took me probably 2 or 3 months before I found out how she found me. But after, my initial surprise, I went, my prayer just got answered in the most amazing way. So that was the first one. Check that box. Second one, dramatic mystical experience. Check that box. Really some profound things happening in my life, which
Right.
Then sent me on a quest for more understanding of what had happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was the mystical experience that really floored me. Somebody might explain getting the teaching job with no interview. That's just a coincidence, an unusual one.
Right.
Kind of a stretch, but the mystical experience was, beyond explanation. So I started to look. I started to read. I'm an English teacher, big reader all my life, and I found books on near-death experience. I found some books not too many on mystical experience, really, more on near-death experiences. I found Raymond Moody's Life After Life. And that, when I read about people's descriptions of meeting or seeing the light, they described exactly what had happened to me. Their
Wow.
experiences paralleled mine. So although I didn't have probably the central core experience of a near-death experience, which is being in the presence of the being of light, and feeling the bliss and the unconditional love. And so that started me on a long journey of exploring, meditating, and just studying, which brought me to the International Association for Near Studies.
Perfect.
Uh,
So you taught for how many years?
well, I taught in Denver. I taught refugees for a number of years. One program kind of led into another, and I actually wrote and co-authored and co-illustrated a 2-volume textbook for English as a second language for refugees, which was a great experience. But parallel to my teaching was my spiritual journey. And I investigated, all kinds of different gurus and meditation techniques. But really, I never joined any particular group. And after, I guess in about I started to attend IANDS conferences. IANDS
okay.
has a wonderful conference every year, and I will urge you to take a look at it. So I attended a conference or two, and I met the editor of Vital Signs, which is the newsletter that IANDS sends out on a quarterly basis to members. And I started to work with the editor a little bit and wrote occasional articles. I don't know, it's such a long story. I don't know if I can tell everything. As time went on, I was going to retire from teaching. I started to do video in a kind of unusual way. My college where I was teaching started to offer courses in videography. And at first I resisted the impulse. I really wanted to take those courses, but I really didn't have time. But I finally accepted that prodding, that inner prodding, and I started taking video classes, movie making. And one thing led to another, and I became a videographer.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story.
Well, that's this. I need to write this whole story because there's so much more to it. It also involves IANDS and the Monroe Institute are probably the two main organizations. Well, I have to say there's three. Self-Realization Fellowship became very important to me. I love the message of love that came through Paramahansa Yogananda. And I took all the lessons that they gave, and that was 5 years worth of lessons I took.
Wow.
And I love that. But I didn't become very closely associated with the organization. I took all the lessons. I supported the organization. I made donations and things, but I didn't become like a disciple. So self-realization, the Monroe Institute, where I experienced hemisync. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a binaural beat technology, it's quite powerful, and I would recommend it to people. To if you want to investigate a way, it can help you kind of be a meditation booster. You can use music. They have many different programs available, and that's the MonroeInstitute.org if you're interested in that.
Yeah, we'll take a look. When Now, we've touched on IANDS quite a bit. What's the mission statement of IANDS for the listeners who don't know about it? Most of them do, but let's put that out there.
Well, IANDS has three. I don't have the mission statement memorized.
That's okay. That's fine.
Actually, we have more than one, but they all center around educating the public about near-death experiences. And we do that through our website, through other programs. So education is one major aspect of our mission. Support is another. We need to support near-death experiencers and other people like me. Nobody understood what I had, what had happened to me when I had a mystical experience. But I found IANDS, and I felt so at home. I could share my story. And that's the way it is for people who've had near-death experiences. You know, there still is a great taboo in our culture. Although there's a lot of information about near-death experiences, a lot of times when a person who's had one tries to speak to their health, even their minister or their next door neighbor or their family, they find that people are not prepared to hear about an event that does not fit with the dominant worldview.
Exactly.
And I think we're still in the 20th century material view. It hasn't shifted. It's shifting, but it hasn't really totally shifted. So people can feel very shunned. They can feel shut down. They stop talking about what happened to them. And yet this is the most important thing that's ever happened to them in their lives.
Right.
And here they are, they can't talk about it. So IANDS provides safe space through groups. We have over 90 groups throughout the United States and internationally where people gather to share their experiences and to learn more through the lectures that are provided. But it's a safe space for people to be able to acknowledge their own true experience. There's nothing like personal experience to change people's minds about a lot of things. I was 12 years old when mine started getting changed. But, you know, it happens to people when they're 30, 40, 50, 80 years old. These experiences happen and they need somebody to understand. So education, support, the third pillar really is research. We support research in the area of near-death experiences and related experiences. And our yearly conference, which is this year going to be the weekend of Labor Day. We're hoping to have it in person.
Yes.
You can get more information on IANDS.org.
Mm-hmm.
IANDS.org, and you'll find information and continuing updates on what's happening with the website. But so the conference gives researchers a place to share their research. We collect a database of experiences so that if you've had a near-death experience and are willing to share, again, you can go to IANDS.org, IANDS.org, and you'll find there under the menu, you'll find a place to share your experience. Then researchers are able to access our database. It's open. You have to apply to access the database because you have to have some instruction on how to use it. But it's available for researchers, and so we try very hard to support researchers. We also have a journal. It's called the Journal for Near-Death Studies. It comes out 3 times a year. It is by subscription for libraries, and also for individuals can subscribe. And it is a true peer-reviewed journal of research articles. So it's an academic publication. You also, if you choose to be a member of IANDS, you have a number of benefits. If you're a professional benefit, one of the perks is that you get a copy of the Journal for Near-Death Studies with research 3 times a year. And it's fascinating, some of the articles that are in there. It's well worth your time. People also, other researchers write letters commenting, and those are interesting too. Sometimes there's some sort of topic where you get 2 sides, 2 different sides, which is, I think, the most exciting.
Exactly. That would be really interesting.
The whole range, it's not just one person's opinion, but here's information, here's research on 2 sides of an issue. So
good.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Good. Roberta, let me ask you about your colleague, Diane Cochran.
Yes.
The Vietnam era nurse, combat nurse. Now, I'm a Vietnam era veteran, but I was not a combat medic. She talks about the conversations, and people are self-censoring.
Oh, absolutely. After being censored by their peers, by their medical caregivers, by other people, they self-censor pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But that festers inside. This overwhelming experience is there unprocessed, and it's a problem for veterans, for people in the military. I got to know Diane Corcoran, Colonel, retired Diane Corcoran, through a project that she was very much involved in, that we worked together on. And that was creating a video called Understanding Veterans' Near-Death Experiences. And since Diane, during the Vietnamese War, met a soldier who'd had a near-death experience and didn't understand what happened to him, she became very intrigued, and it really became the passion of her life to learn more about near-death experiences and to teach others. And so she taught people in the U.S. Army. She would run, educational events for medical professionals. I don't know who all she gave these to, but through her career, and it was a long career, she did do these educational events. Then she wanted to have a video that focused on veterans and the near-death experience. I want to tell everybody this video I made was sold by IANDS. It's still for sale on IANDS website, but very shortly it is going to be put on YouTube and available on IANDS website for free to anyone who wants to see it. And I hope everybody wants to see it and to share it. It features Diane, who's a registered nurse and a PhD. Pardon me. And other doctors, healthcare providers, doctors, veteran experiencers themselves, clergy. It has a broad range of people talking about what happened. But the most fascinating part of the video is the accounts by veterans of what happened to them when they had near-death experiences in the service. Not always in combat, sometimes accidents, resulted in near-death experiences.
Exactly.
And how that
Exactly.
impacted their whole lives. Another thing in that video is how it impacted families. It doesn't just impact the person, it impacts the whole family.
Exactly. And that's something that you and I have talked about, and Diane and I have corresponded. And we met, introduced you to Awakening Wholeness, which is a nonprofit operation working with veterans in Phoenix,
Mhm.
in the Phoenix area. And one of the big issues is getting this out in the open, having this become not in the shadows kind of conversation. Let's talk about this. And I've seen the video, ladies and gentlemen. You need to see this video. It is powerful. And one of the things that I think Diane and one of the doctors says is there's so much misdiagnosis.
Absolutely. Yep. I learned so much making that. And my heart just broke when I saw, in fact, I think I told you when I was interviewing um, a person, a veteran, he didn't realize until I interviewed him that he'd had a near-death experience. It had never been diagnosed. He was misdiagnosed, and he was well, he wasn't really misdiagnosed. He was diagnosed for PTSD, and he was diagnosed, I think, maybe for traumatic brain injury. But the thing that was really bothering him was that he couldn't sleep. And he couldn't sleep because he was afraid to go back into a vision he had had of a dark abyss, a deep pit that he was afraid of falling into and being lost forever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was having a challenging near-death experience, and he needed help in processing that. And had he been able to process it, he would have been able to sleep. He would have been able to deal with it. But even his counselor did not understand what had happened to him. She was listening to the interview, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I had one page in one book in my counseling education about near-death experiences, and I never thought of it." But that's what had happened to him. And that it wasn't the PTS that was so terrible for him. It was the not being able to sleep because of the fear that was generated by this challenging near-death experience that could have been processed had a counselor understood. And I believe he got counseling
Mm-hmm.
after that interview. That I didn't get feedback later, but that was my expectation.
Understanding. One of the
Yes.
things I saw is I worked with a number of combat veterans, and unfortunately, the Department of Defense and the VA didn't recognize PTS and traumatic brain injury until recently. It was considered
Right.
a mental illness or a weakness in your capacity. So what I see with veterans and what I'm hearing you say about the NDE people is they want to talk to like people who've been there, who
Exactly.
understand it, and then
Yes.
acceptance within, which hopefully then gives them the courage to have the conversations outside of the group. But with the veterans that I've worked with, particularly the PTSD war veterans, they just they don't want to go. They don't want to talk about it. Just get away. And if they identify, hey, here's a trigger. This is something that's triggering this. Be aware. Be aware. But until we get this conversation out into the open, this is always going to be something in the shadows.
I do want to say that we have something new to offer.
Good.
It's online. You don't have to leave your house. You can remain distant if you're nervous. You don't even have to put your picture up. It's a Zoom meeting for veterans and military, led by Diane Corcoran, who understands PTS, traumatic brain injury. She's a nurse, a long experience with, of course, she was in the military. She understands military culture. And that just started in December. And you can find out about it. IANDS has a branch of the organization called ISGO, IANDS sharing groups online, ISGO. And you can go to isgo.iands.org and find information. You can join a group that's specifically for military, or you can join a group that is just for people who've had either near-death experiences, mystical experiences, some spiritual experience that that you want to talk about. There are a number of groups available at different times of the week with trained facilitators. So isgo.iands.org. And just to let you know, not only does ISGO support these sharing groups, it also has many events online through Zoom of different speakers, different experts in the field, researchers. They have probably maybe 4 or more events each month, plus the sharing groups. So it's well worth going to their website to take a look and see what's available to you.
It's this has been enlightening conversation. Roberta and I have spoken a couple of times, and I get more and more impressed with what this organization is doing and how it is going about getting the taking away the fear. And that was a big thing with PTS, was the fear that something's wrong with me. And we're having the same with the NDEs, and we're finally moving away from that stigma.
There's one thing I really want to say. I think that it's impossible for counselors and doctors, healthcare providers, clergy, to diagnose a person with PTS, traumatic brain injury, if they do not know about the number 3, near-death experience. This is a huge problem. If you diagnose somebody who's had a near-death experience with PTS, they are medicated, and the medication does nothing for somebody who's had a near-death experience. It only gives them side effects that are, can be very effective, be worse. You're not helping them, you're hurting them. How can anyone diagnose these first 2 things without checking for the third? And that's what's happening all over the country, is that people are getting misdiagnosed. We know that especially combat veterans have a very high, 25 to 50% is what studies are showing. That I was like shocked at the numbers of combat veterans having near-death experiences, but they won't tell you about it.
That's correct.
You can say, "Oh no, they don't have those. I've never heard of it." Well, you don't hear of it because they won't tell you.
They won't talk, and you're not part of their tribe. Therefore, you don't understand. And being a veteran, you just don't understand. And
if they've had a near-death experience before their military service, they are terrified to be diagnosed with a pre-existing condition of some sort and lose their benefits. So, but if you go to isgo.iands.org and you join a group there, it is absolutely private. You should have no fear that anyone is going to talk outside that group. Everybody is clearly told that whatever is said here stays here. This is a private conversation among veterans, military people who've had similar experiences.
And that may open them up for a willingness to speak. Roberta, this has been just tremendous. Is there any last thoughts or words you want to leave with the viewers around the world here?
I guess all I want to say is that the near-death experience, mystical experiences, they bring great great lessons, not just for the people who have had them, but for other people as well. We've had studies where students who have been taught about near-death experiences become like near-death experiencers. They lose their fear of death. Like 99% of near-death experiencers don't fear death. Students who learn about it don't fear death so much anymore. They become more altruistic. They want to help people. They want to live in service. They understand that we're all connected. The messages that come through study of near-death experiences could really help to heal the world and give comfort to so many people who are grieving. So all I can say is you can go to any, you can Google books on near-death experiences and you'll get many, many books. Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody is a main one. Another one that's coming out, I just have so many things to tell you, it is by Bruce Grayson, called After. And Dr. Bruce Grayson is one of the premier researchers. He was a friend of Raymond Moody's, so they've been working on this together since the 1970s. And his book is coming out in March, and on ISGO, he's going to be having an interview. So it'll be the kickoff interview for his new book called After, which is about the afterlife and near-death experiences. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. You can buy it at the same time you register for this interview if you would like to see it with Dr. Bruce Grayson. So there's really so many things going on at IANDS. We have a symposium coming up at the end of April, which is going to be focused mostly for healthcare providers, but open to the general public, and I think will be fascinating to the general public. So
I bet it will.
Yeah, so they're all we are. What I have to say is we're really rolling, and I'm kind of hanging on, trying to keep up with all the wonderful initiatives going on at IANDS.
That is terrific. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we are just about out of time. I want to thank Roberta one more time for sharing her story, number one, and shedding light on IANDS and this topic that must become out in the open. It can no longer be held in the shadows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what life throws at you, and it throws a lot at you, please do three things: look up, get up, and never, ever give up. Please pick up the pieces and start moving forward, and better people and better times will come into your life. You may meet someone like Roberta Moore who will improve your life.
Frank, before you sign off, can I do one more thing?
Sure.
I'm on YouTube with videos of near-death experiences. And if you go to youtube.com/c/NDE video, and you can just search for NDE video. There's some wonderful videos on there that I'm happy to share with you. And there are more coming as soon as I can get them edited and up. So thanks again. I enjoyed talking with you, Frank, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see this show on Roku TV, or you can see it on my YouTube page, Frank Zaccari. I will also send links to Roberta, and she'll put it out where all the places that she puts her stuff. If you do go to the YouTube page, please subscribe. And let me leave you with this as I leave every single week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Roberta showed us where many of those rocks are. Join me next week as we have another life-altering event. Thank you.